Let's talk about something that's very important to me and has touched my life in particular, but all of our lives. Russian misinformation and the unconventional warfare campaigns. These are things that have been going on for a long, long time, right? So just a little background, something that really stuck out with me for this is during the civil rights era, Russian operatives, or back then Soviet operatives, would go to places in the US that were dealing with a lot of social unrest around civil rights, and they would go to affluent white neighborhoods, and they would, on their driveways and in their mailboxes, be passing out Black Panther pamphlets that were created by the Soviets and were incredibly aggressive and violent, more so than what the actual Black Panthers were doing or even discussing or were allowed to be put out. And then at the same time, they would go to historically Black neighborhoods and they would be putting out KKK and other racist information in the mailboxes, on people's doors, on their driveways, on the poles. So there was already conflict there, and there was already a legitimate opposition to a certain group happening there. And they inflamed those and did their best to make sure that proper discourse wasn't able to happen. And they gave both communities more reason to fear than they realistically had. And I want to caveat this by saying that the Black community, especially during that time, had reasons to fear and did experience a lot of violence. But what these programs did was definitely inflame it and just create further unrest. So then this has continued for a long time. Not, to be honest, I'm not really that aware of Russia in the 90s and how effective they were to continue to do these types of things. But I will say that I believe my first encounter with something like this was in 2008, just about 1 or 2 weeks prior to me going to basic training. I had encountered an anti-war group in Seattle, and I know it might be difficult to understand, but yeah, I was interested in what they had to say, and I was happy to be part of their organization. So I asked them, oh yeah, give me your materials, we can stay in touch. And then less than 24 hours later, I was getting through on my flight through the airport, and I get a phone call, and this woman's just frantic, and she starts talking about this war of American aggression. And I'm like, we talking about Iraq again? Like, what, like, why is there so much, like, urgency? And she's like, no, Georgia. And then she starts talking, and she has this entire list of talking points of a very clear history of what happened, and all from the Russian point of view, and all the talking points very clearly laid out. And the level of information she had, as well as the details that she had, were what really stuck out to me, because I was sitting down watching CNN when she called me, and during this conversation, breaking news, Russia invades Georgia, and the CNN correspondents, who CNN is a multinational organization, and it's has more resources than almost every other news organization. They're really struggling to catch up and just get the basic details, while this woman, who's just some random person, knows more than, from what I could tell, most of the people in our government, and for sure more than what people at CNN had. And she laid it down very clearly about how this is a war of American aggression. as Georgia is invaded by Russia. And the American aggression was helping, we had trained Georgians to defend themselves. So that was the beginning. So of course I was like, I don't want to talk to you anymore, lady. But it's kind of funny because this ended up going full circle. By the end of my time in the military, I had actually participated in a joint US-Russian training exercise. And this was as a direct result of the Georgian ceasefire. And as a way to try to cool the tensions, our militaries did some training together, right? So my next experiences, I realized I was transgender in 2010, 11, around that time. And yes, it's 2011. And I didn't come out until about 2013. And I started coming out to a few of my friends. And unfortunately, one of those friends had outed me to my unit. Now, luckily, the combat arms of my unit were incredibly open-minded, and they gave me a lot of support, and they were the ones who informed me from the beginning that I had been outed. And from my command all the way to the operators, I had more support than I ever thought I would. And for my fellow support soldiers, once they realized this, they would react in a way that was kind of surprising, but at the same time not. They took it as, a bunch of young patriots. They took it as another reason America's great. That only in America can a paratrooper in this high Operation Temple unit can change genders. That only in free America can we do that, right? And that was another reason why America was great, that I could continue to serve and be a transgender soldier. Well, 2013, if you know that the guy that I'm talking about, Gerasimov, was when he really took the lead and he really pushed this modern psychological and misinformation campaigns. And that was shortly before the Russian invasion of Ukraine, when they took Donbass, Luhansk, and Crimea. I got to watch as these fellow soldiers, and especially the support staff, the ones who weren't entirely confident in their masculinity, I got to watch them from supporting me, from having my back, to start looking at me funny. And this is when I really discovered what Charles Darwin meant by comparing ideas to a virus. That's what a meme is. It's an idea that spreads like a virus. And I watched throughout my unit as people became more and more hostile to me. I suddenly felt very isolated. And particularly if I had to deal with mechanics or something, it was downright scary. I feared for my life at times. And this isn't the first time it happened. Not fulfilling typical role of masculinity was a big issue during my deployment with one of my fellow soldiers. But it was only one, and now it's every single one. My leadership had given me the ability, we hadn't explicitly discussed it, but I had the opportunity to transition in service. I was also getting help for PTSD. And I had the opportunity to basically be on sick leave for up to a year to work on my mental health, and at the time transition. Instead, I chose to get out, and there are multiple reasons for that, but one of them was I didn't want to tear my unit apart, because my unit still had missions going on. People were constantly rotating out. I felt we didn't need this distraction. I wonder if I should have asserted myself now, but, past is the past. But this whole transphobia thing, all this transphobic stuff that the people talk about, I very clearly remember the time before and after this guy led that campaign against me. He spotted this as a very easy opportunity to exploit, because most people haven't met someone like me, or even if they have, we're an easy target. And, conservatives all across America before, even if they didn't agree with me or support me, they wouldn't allow people to openly harass me. They would say they disagree or they don't support me, but at the end of the day, they recognize me as human and would stand up for me if someone else was giving me problems. Open bigotry and violence towards me still had to happen in the shadows. So this man has robbed me of so much of my life, and he's robbed you too. Because it's been nonstop since then. It's been a war on truth, a war on decency since that moment. Black Lives Matter, all the nasty discourse was very much influenced by the Russians, and this man in particular. I don't think I've mentioned this before, but why it's so important to bring this up now is because over the last month, nasty discourse and misinformation has been ratcheted way up, because this man has become the senior military commander and he's in charge of all forces in Ukraine. He's always been influential, but he has never been as influential as he is now. We have already seen, if you go to your Instagram or other social media, I'm sure you'll notice that there's just incredibly inflammatory remarks, more so than we've ever seen. People just so quick to fight. And a lot of those people are not bots. A lot of those people are not agents or working in support of them. But because they have succeeded in creating such a nasty environment, then truth is pretty much already gone, and people are just ready to go. So this is our fight. That's really our struggle, and that's something I want everybody to think about every day, is ways to overcome this, ways to have proper discourse with people we don't agree with, or ways to even clarify, to understand, is there even a disagreement happening here? Or if there is a disagreement, is it one that actually matters? Because people are allowed to have different opinions on this or that. And, to be clear, I'm talking about if you like this series or not, or you like this movie or not. I'm allowed to say, I don't support that, and I don't like that you support that. And it's just that. It doesn't have to be anything more, but I think they have succeeded in making sure that just that creates deep conflict. That's how it's affecting us on the small scale, but it's already happened, but you're gonna see more and more and more stuff coming out of Ukraine. That sledgehammer execution video? Turns out that was fake. Why did they do that? Why did they fake it? It's because now everybody was like, wow, these guys are evil. They're monsters. Do you see this sick stuff they did? And then it turns out, oh no, that didn't happen. They faked their own execution video of their own soldier. And the reason they do these things is just to make reality ambiguous. to make all criticisms against them less valid. Since this guy has taken command, there's been so many videos coming out of Ukrainians torturing Russians, or Ukrainians committing crimes against their own soldiers. It probably happens. War is really nasty, and humanity really has its flaws. And I'm sure if we search hard enough, we can uncover one or two instances of this happening. But we're in the early stages, and a lot of those attempts are pretty weak, and it's pretty easy to see through them. But as time goes on, they're going to get more effective and more real. And the challenge for us is to figure out how to hold on to reality. And the most important thing is just to realize that while it's very important to sympathize with Russian people, and we should never give up our humanity against anyone, that essentially anything coming from that realm is a lie. And yeah, where do we move on from there? How do we move on from there? Please don't shut down when I say this next thing, because people have a problem with the whole Nazi stuff. But so Hitler had this kind of theory that we all know the type of world that he wanted to see, and his beliefs about violence and supremacy and all of that. Well, a big piece of that was he felt that even if he lost the war, he still changed the world, because he still put it out there as a legitimate thing and as something that can affect others and can exist. And that's never going back in the bag. We can never say that it's not possible, because he proved it is possible even if he lost. And he believed that more free nations would have to become more authoritarian and more right-wing just to win the fight against him. And that's exactly what has happened. So with this war on truth, even if they fail, it seems they will have won in their efforts to make a more apathetic population and a world where truth no longer exists. There can be multiple truths, and the truth is always just the truth as we know it. But that does not gain legitimacy to the agendas that they try to push or the way they try to push those ideas. So this is a big challenge. I keep saying that. This is a huge existential challenge we face, because we have so many issues we're facing in our modern world, and we will not be able to overcome them as long as this type of thing is allowed to exist. Until we find effective counters against this, until we can have some sort of unity and really establish common ground with each other, they will keep winning, and we will keep suffering. All of us will be suffering because of the effects of them, but specifically this man. So that's why he's so important. That's why I'm so passionate about it. And I don't have solutions for it, but I think it's important for all of us to start evaluating how we can personally resist it and ways that we as society can push back.